Hello, my name is Konstantinos Papaioannou. I am a PhD student in the University of Western Macedonia of Greece. And in this presentation, we're going to see the importance of human resources management on law enforcement agencies. And also we are going to discuss about the factors which can influence the personnel performance. The purpose of this article is, of course, to provide to the reader the knowledge of why is it important to implement human resource management on law enforcement agencies, and also to emerge which factors influence the staff performance most. Maximizing the performance of personnel was always the main issue for enterprises and private organizations. It was the basis on which HRM was built. And to support this basis, enterprises adopted a contemporary management of their employees based more on human factors. And this is the true meaning of HRM, the creation of this kind of human-centered management in order to increase the performance of employees and secure the so-called competitive advantage on the market. And to succeed this competitive advantage, a key structural tool of this management is the emphasis on the way of handling the functions of human resources management, which includes job analysis, the training of the personnel, the evaluation of their performance, the compensation, the health, safety working environment, and the industrial relations of the employees. It's not very clear for many people to understand the difference between the term of human resources management and personnel management. These two terms are not two opposing concepts, but the first is a development of the second. The new philosophy in the management of workers reflects the difference between these two conditions. The separation of these two concepts, apart from how they are administrated, is also noted in the time scale of staff utilization. Personnel management manages staff in a short-term perspective in the sense of cost, while human resources management treats staff in the sense of asset for the enterprise and invests over a long period to the personnel. Personnel management is also linked to the concept of civil administration of staff, and its role seems to be more bureaucratic. On the other hand, human resource management, apart from the management activities of staff recruitment, dismissal, or payments, gives all its attention to the activities that have been progressively developed in recent years, which includes communication relations between employees and administration, or personnel evaluation and education of personnel. Human resources management essentially points out its difference from the personnel management through the qualitative elements it adds to the functional procedures. In this table, we can see that HRM includes all the functions of personnel management, such as HR planning, job analysis, compensation, performance management, training and development, labor relations, and also the qualitative elements of leadership, organizational learning, management of knowledge of personnel, group cooperation and willingness for performance, or internal communication of the staff. Before we proceed to the research of this article, it's very important to explain the functions of human resources management. Human resource planning is the function of HRM which is related to the identification of the needs of an organization and prepares the recruitment of human resources, both qualitatively and quantitatively. It starts with the evaluation of staff availability, and as a second step, organization is trying to strengthen the weaknesses and cover the needs. The second function is job analysis, which includes the job description and the job specification. The job description specifies the tasks, competencies, responsibilities, and the object of employment implied by the position, and the job specification refers to the existence of a list which contains the minimum required skills, knowledge, or abilities, even personality traits, which are required to meet the obligations on the position. The function of recruitment and selection of staff as we can understand, is defined as the function which invites and identifies the appropriate staff to cover job vacancies. Personnel may be recruited either internally or externally. We have also the function of training and development of staff. Training is a process of learning and training personnel for the immediate improvement of its performance. And development refers to the process of learning and training staff to improve their long-term performance. And it focuses to develop capacities that will have an impact on personnel in the future. The function of evaluation of performance, it concerns an assessment of the performance of the work and the services provided by the personnel. And as a process, the performance assessment shall take into consideration the traits, the skills of the worker, and shall be evaluated by assessing their efficiency to increase the performance. It has not the meaning of punishment, but improvement of personnel weaknesses. The function of compensation of personnel, which are divided into direct and indirect. Direct economic remuneration shall consist of wages or salaries, and indirect economic rewards includes medical care, life insurance, social security, holiday allowances, and even food or education. The function of health and safety of personnel, which is related to the working environment of the staff, is defined as the prevention and protection of employees from situations that may harm physically, mentally, or emotionally their health, and it is also called to provide the appropriate conditions for the protection of personnel against the work stress. Of course, this is not addressed through the use of equipment or the provision of secure facilities, but through the leadership of the management, by understanding the personal and work problems of the employees, and creating the appropriate conditions for appeasing it and the development of good spirit and cooperation within the undertaking, such as staff meetings, entertainment programs, even tours for the staff. Last but not least, we have the function of labor relations. It's also mentioned as internal communication, and this function refers to the relationship and communication of employees and administration. And for many researchers, labor relations is the core function of human resources management. And here comes the question, why is it important to implement human resources management on law enforcement agencies? The need to develop a human-centered management was carried out in a competitive environment with the ultimate aim of maximizing the company's revenues by improving the efficiency of its personnel. But are there grounds for applying it to law enforcement agencies? And how important is HRM to bodies which are not aimed at profits? Hellenic Coast Guard is one of law enforcement agencies in Greece. It is responsible for seaport and sea border surveillance, prevention of illegal immigration, and protection of marine pollution. The implementation of HRM in the Hellenic Coast Guard, which may lead to an increase in the efficiency of its staff, is essential if one considers the multidimensional role that it plays in a country's social, economic, and political situation. Ensuring social and economic balance through the fight against crime, or political stability through the best possible surveillance of borders and the management of the migration phenomenon. The maximization of staff performance through a human-centered HRM appears to be imperative. Whether HRM functions described above affect the performance of the staff and to what extent has been examined through the qualitative research to officials of Hellenic Coast Guard. To investigate the importance of HRM and the influence factors on Hellenic Coast Guard performance, it was considered necessary to carry out qualitative research of Hellenic Coast Guard officers. The idea of this research came to present more facts about the importance of HRM and its relation to the performance of Hellenic Coast Guard personnel. The technique of the research was based on proposed sampling, 20 structured interviews of Coast Guard officers were conducted. The qualitative data collection method was structured on interviews by using pre-organized questions. This research allowed us to understand which factors affect Hellenic Coast Guard personnel performance, which is their perception of human resources management and its functions, and which human resources management functions affect their performance more than others. About the analysis of the results of the research, a deductive approach was used in which the data were grouped and compared for similarities and differences. This approach led us to classify the type of qualitative analysis in which the answers of the interview were categorized to be summarized while assisting the purpose of tabulation as well. Finally, a very important fact has to be mentioned is the interest of the interviewers to gain knowledge of the facts that were called to answer on this interview and the final results of the research. In the first part of the interview, officers were asked about the factors that can influence their performance in the working environment. In particular, the officers were called to respond spontaneously about the factors that can affect their performance. As we can see in the table, all officers referenced the qualitative elements of HRM, such as team willingness, the common staff communication, the existence of a common vision and culture with senior management, even leadership spirit by the leader. They also mentioned that the most important factor which can influence their performance is internal cooperation and communication among the personnel of the agency that they work for. This is the function of labor relation. In addition, in the spontaneous recording for performance influencing factors, 30% of the sample reported the major influence on their performance that plays the providing training and development in the work they are engaged in. This is the function of training and development. 25% of the sample reported the selection parameters at the position they desire and they have the corresponding qualifications. This is a HRM function of planning. 20% of the sample reported the objective assessment and evaluation on their performance. This is the function of performance evaluation. And finally, 10% of the sample reported the correct description and the distribution of responsibilities at the workplace they have taken. This is the function of job analysis. In the second part of the research, officers were asked about their perception of the term of human resources management. We wanted to understand which is their level of knowledge about its principles and its functions. All officers reported that HRM is a strategy of managing employees to maximize the performance, and truly this is the main object of HRM. The 75% of the sample reported that HRM is related to meet the needs of personnel and place appropriate staff in appropriate positions based on objective qualifications. This is a function of planning and selection of HRM. Also, 15% of the sample reported that HRM is linked to the personnel training process. This is the function of training. 10% reported that HRM is linked to the staff remuneration procedure. This is the function of compensation. Also, 10% reported that HRM has the objective of the evaluation of the performance. And finally, 5% included the responsibility of the human resources management in the employment relationships, only 5%, to one factor that was mentioned before as the main factor that can influence their performance. In the third part of the research, explained to the officers the functions of human resources management, and they were called to classify the functions that influence their performance most. We have to note that all officers, after explaining the subject of each function separately, reported that more or less they all affect their performance. In particular, the function of job analysis and labor relations has a high impact on the performance of all the officers. The function of training, development, and performance evaluation have a high impact on the 90% of the sample. The function of human resources planning has a high impact on the performance of the 8% of the officers. And the function of recruitment and selection of staff has a high impact on the performance of the 50% of the officers. On the other hand, the factor of health and safety affects the performance of 25% of the officers in a high level and a low level in 75% of the officers. Finally, staff compensation affects to a high degree the performance of 5% of the officers and to a low degree the performance of 95% of the sample. The hypothesis raised about the importance of HRM in the performance of personnel in the law enforcement agencies has been fully confirmed according to the results of the research, and at the same time very important findings were discovered about the factors influencing job performance of Hellenic Coast Guard personnel. The first part of the research was requested by the officers to spontaneously identify the factors that can affect their performance. The characteristics of the team cooperation and the distribution for performance, the existence of a common vision and leadership of management, which has been recorded, are the main qualitative characteristics of the human resource management which distinguish it from the personnel management as they were described in the table 1. This fact establishes the need of applying human resources management to personnel to maximize its performance. In addition, important research data highlighted the common view of all officers in the importance of internal communication and work relations between employees, which refers to one of the basic functions of human resources management, which characterize it most, the function of labor relations. Furthermore, officers were recorded as factors of influence in their performance: the choice in the workplace they wish to work, the provision of training and the description of the job assigned to them, the evaluation of their performance and their development through their work, which are all related to human resource management practices of planning, evaluation, education and development of the personnel, and proves its importance and affection on maximizing the personnel performance. Completing the first part of the research, officers were asked to record how they perceive the concept of human resources management, to be recorded whether the officers are aware of the link between the factors that influence their performance and the objects of human resources management. 75% of the sample refers that HR planning is the main object of human resource management, covering essentially the needs for personnel qualitatively and quantitatively, while at a small rate refers to the provision of training, compensation and performance evaluation. It was impressive that the function of labor relations, even though was mentioned as the most important factor influencing the performance of all officers, only 5% of the sample referenced it as a subject of human resource management. This demonstrates that any failure by senior officers to implement the function of the human resource management may be due to their lack of awareness of HRM objects. In support of this hypothesis, all officers reported that they had not been educated on the subject of HRM in their academy, and its functions are not being satisfactorily implemented in their service, and they noted that it plays a definite role in maximizing their performance, which confirms the original research theory. In the third part of the research, officers were asked to classify the functions of human resources management according to the level of impact on their performance. As it was expected from their spontaneous records on influencing factors in the first part of the research, all officers reported labor relations as a high performance factor, as well as the 80 to 90% of officers the factors of education and planning. Shared importance as a factor of influence is the selection of personnel, while the vast majority of officers mention low influence on their performance, the function of staff salaries and health and safety environment. The findings clearly illustrate which functions of human resources management are more important than others. For example, an employee with the proper training, the right position, with the right communication and cooperation relationships with the rest of the workers, maximize its performance regardless of the compensation factor and the conditions of the work environment. It's clearly due to the type of organization that employs the staff, and the level of influence of these factors will likely vary in the private sector. The Hellenic Coast Guard is a law enforcement agency that belongs to the public sector. According to the results of the research, the officers appear to have accepted the level of the salaries as they are specific for all staff working Coast Guard, and even if they don't feel that they are rewarded enough, they have accepted this fact and therefore does not significantly affect their performance. Similarly, as regards working conditions and the health and safety environment, the staff appears to have accepted the conditions provided by the public sector and have been adjusted to work under these conditions from the outset of their recruitment. On the contrary, in the private sector, these conditions could be of great importance, and staff may not be so flexible and choose to work for another organization. In conclusion, maximizing the performance of personnel in law enforcement agencies through the implementation of human resources management may differ in terms of the results of private organizations which focus on maximizing their profits. However, the increase of law enforcement efficiency offers a very significant benefit to the state with enormous economic, social, and political implications. The contribution of law enforcement agencies to the social, economic, and political stability of the country takes place through the fight against crime and the best possible border surveillance and management of migration phenomena. Particular importance is placed to the above-mentioned balance of the state and the role of Hellenic Coast Guard, with its additional competence in the research and the rescue of people at sea and the protection of the marine environment. Maximizing the efficiency of the staff is an essential condition for achieving these objectives. According to the research results, the application of human resources management plays a determining role in the performance of employees. The sample underlined that labor relations, human resources planning, training, selection, job analysis, and performance evaluation are considered the most important factors of maximizing the performance of the employees. In contrast, the working environment conditions or compensations play a less important role in the officer's performance, and this fact proves that simply by implementing a specific management method without imposing any financial burden on additional salaries or facilities, it is possible to maximize the performance of an organization like law enforcement agencies, which offer multiple benefits at a collective level. Thank you for your attention.